Hey everyone, I'm Phoebe Lapine. I am the author of the book The Wellness Project and founder of the site Me Phoebe. I've been blogging in various capacities for over 10 years now, back before Instagram was a thing. I think Pinterest was maybe a little bit of a thing then, but basically I feel like a dinosaur half of the time these days, so I'm personally very excited to pick the brains of these fabulous women of social media. So I'm gonna let them each quickly introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their platforms, talk a little bit about what social media platforms they use the most, and kind of what content they create. Why don't you go first, Dara?
Thank you. So I'm Dara Pollock, and I am founder of the Skinny Pig Inc. and at Skinny Pig NYC is my handle. And I am also a blogger for many moons, 11 years now, I think, too. So we're old. We don't need to talk about that. It's fine. But before Instagram was a thing, I've been an Instagrammer for, I don't know, I think since 2013 or 2014. Like I said, I'm a blogger. I also do some Pinterest because I'm a brand ambassador for Fresh Direct, recipe developer and whatnot. So, and a photographer, food photographer for restaurants and hospitality groups and PR companies around the city. I feel like that kind of covers it. I feel like I have 10 different jobs, but those are the core ones right now.
Hi guys, my name is Alyssa and I am the founder of Simply Quinoa. Like them, it's been what feels like forever, like probably 9 years for me. And social media-wise, I'm pretty much everywhere besides Twitter. Like Pinterest, Facebook, YouTube. Video is a really big part of my platform, and it's something that I'm sure we're gonna talk about it, but it's something that I've been really focusing on personally for my brand, and has been a big part of the growth. So I'm excited to chat about that. And yeah, that's pretty much me.
Hi, I'm Lynn. So a little bit different from these two. I co-founded Lettucedine, the Instagram. So we're not really a blog. We're just kind of mostly a photo-based Instagram. So we've been around for about 5 years. Alice and I started when we were in college. We were just kind of like friends, and we wanted to like try different things around New York, and the Instagram was the way of doing it. We're also on Snapchat. It's just our way of diversifying our audience, but still reaching the correct kind of millennial type audience we're looking for. We focus mostly on photos and captions, so if you know us, come by and say hi later.
Awesome. Well, we're going to start off by talking a little bit about content, since I think most people can probably agree that content is probably the most important factor for building a social presence. And I want to start off by talking about Instagram, because I am going to assume that that is the platform that most people in the room are spending the most time on. Do you want a show of hands who's spending the most time on Instagram? Okay.
Wow.
Had a feeling. So Dara,
yes,
you started in the dark ages like me, but have since created a really robust Instagram following, and you have a really distinct voice. So I would love you to kind of take us behind how the Skinny Pig sausage gets made, what goes into a post, do you focus more on the visual versus the caption, and where do you put your time in terms of pre-production, post-production?
Sure. So first of all, it would be the Skinny Pig bacon gets made.
Oh, sorry.
I love bacon. That's number one. And actually, that is partially how I got started. When I first created my blog, for whatever reason, I was like, I'm going to be a bacon blogger. And I blogged about everything that had to do with bacon. So even to this day, if people, like my friends, see something with bacon, they immediately get it for me or send it to me. So that was a little bit of how things started. And then it just kind of went into like the way of, I guess, like gluttonous food. Like the slogan on my blog is where gluttony is no longer a sin, because, well, that's just what my message was. So I definitely started out with like very like heavy foods, like, you know, bacon, cheeseburgers, pizza, anything that you can think of that was really fattening and terrible for you is the stuff that I was posting and writing about. Still do, but maybe not as much as I used to. So that's a little bit of how it got started. And with Instagram, same exact thing. It was all like really gluttonous, over the top kind of stuff. which is funny because I feel like now that's such a normal thing to see on Instagram, is that over-the-top stuff. In fact, I think most restaurants, and you would probably know this too, they're always trying to just outdo one another with the next big thing. It's all, the next crazy burger or the next thing that's unicorn. Like, everything is unicorn. Cotton candy and glitter on everything. It's like
unicorn bacon. You
enough,
need to make it
right?
happen.
Exactly. But it's just like, do less. So that was kind of like, and now that I've started to like veer a little bit away from that because my photos have gotten better as I've grown, and I wanted my photos to be better. Like, some people don't focus as much on that. Like, my voice was always like sarcastic and kind of dark and like just humorous. I feel like that's always been my brand. And it was not so much about the photos. Like, my photos were okay, but now that I've gotten more experience with this, I wanted my photos to be better. So I made myself work at getting better at the photos. But I think at the end of the day, the people care more about the overall message, So it's a little bit of both. Like, I put in work definitely to be a better photographer, but I still want my message to remain basically the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you guys feel free to chime in on the visual question, because I know there's been a lot of talk. I think there was just an article in The Atlantic recently about the backlash of Instagram and people trying to be more authentic, especially in, I don't know what's below a millennial, but the kids are trying to be more authentic these days. But with food, I mean, it is such a visual thing. So I don't know. You guys chime in on that.
So for me, I started all of my social media platforms as a way to share the content that I was creating for my blog. So it's kind of just been like, I post a new blog post and then I'll share it across everything. But I found that now, as Instagram has kind of grown and people are using that as their main platform as consumers, like, they're not necessarily reading as much anymore, I'm using Instagram almost as like a microblog, and I'm sure you kind of are too, but the caption gets a little bit more personal, it's more in depth, but also to your point with that article, I read the same article, I think that, and I'm personally testing it with my blog, is that Instagram is kind of moving away from the more curated stuff. They want to see what's real. Maybe it's a picture of like you drinking your smoothie in the morning instead of this totally over the top, like drippy whatever. So I'm personally kind of testing that, and I think that's what's really fun about social media, is that you are able to kind of test different things. But forever, my Instagram has just been a very curated, like, everything kind of looks the same with my white background, and I'm trying to kind of incorporate more realness into the food that I share and kind of show that the platform is real and I'm a real human, which I think is a really important piece of especially Instagram. And people are kind of starting to tune into the stories, and they're starting to learn who you are as a person. So incorporating that into the way that you write and the food that you shoot or whatever you're shooting is really important.
Yeah. So I think for us, it was always about, when we took the photo, it was about if the photo is something that the user can recreate. We weren't using special lighting. We weren't crazy about the lens. We realized if the photos was fancier, no one was engaging because it felt very out of touch. And we realized that people, the audience we were engaging with, liked being with connecting with us. So if it was like just a simple iPhone shot and bad lighting, it might not be the greatest photo, but people relate to it and they understand that they can take the same photo. That's always been our thing. There's no need for us. It's like, we can invest in nice lens, nice lights, but at the end of the day, if the audience can't recreate it and can't use us as an inspiration, we found that engagement doesn't help us at all. And then on the other side, we also love using Snapchat, where it's just like, there is no editing, there is no professional photos. It's just, you took the photo from your phone and you just upload it straight there. It's bad lighting, but it's honest, and people can connect to us, and they're like, oh, they're a real person. They're just sharing their experience online, and we can kind of do the same as well.
So that's a good segue. I want to ask you about Snapchat, because I think you're the only one of the four of us who uses it. But it's important, I think, to mention, because as we try and, delegate our time in this increasingly overwhelming world of social media, I think it is important to think about where your demographic skews. And so tell us a little bit about your audience and how you happened on Snapchat and saw it resonating and kind of.
Yeah, so Alice and I started when we were in college. So we talked a lot in our captions. We would talk a lot about like phynos and kind of like things about nothing. We're complaining about how it's cold out there. We don't want to go to class, and we kind of like grew this audience on millennials and Gen Zs, and it was a lot about just kind of being that voice for millennials when it was like, whether it's cold out there, you don't want to go to class, and then now it's like moving on from college, and now it's like figuring out your first real job and kind of everything from there. And we realized that the audience was also on Snapchat, so we kind of jumped on Snapchat. We just kind of started sharing. On Snapchat, we would always share if we were on our walk to class. So a lot of this, we spent, Lettucedine's 5 years, we spent 4 of it in college, so which is why I'm referencing college a lot. But it'll be like we're sitting in class and it's like the professor's late and it's like, oh, it's about 5 minutes into class, should we leave? And it's like this way of engaging with the audience. And the audience on Snapchat were also in college, and they understood that feeling of wanting to just not be in college when it's stuff like that.
Awesome. Okay, I want to get back to Alyssa talking about your portfolio of various social platforms, because I, know a lot of people in this space, and I know you personally, and you're incredibly strategic and thoughtful about how you use each one to the end of either driving traffic or creating, these kind of micro blogs, micro communities. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about, some of the ones we haven't mentioned that much, Pinterest, Facebook, what have you. But really quick, I actually want to poll the audience. How many people here are using social media to drive traffic to a blog versus like as its own thing? Okay. So not as many as probably there would have been 5 years ago, but it's interesting to see. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I have 4 main platforms. Instagram is obviously one of them, Pinterest, YouTube, and then Facebook. So for me, Facebook is kind of just whatever platform. I mean, it still drives traffic, but it's not something that I focus really heavily on. I actually don't personally do anything on my Facebook page. One of my team members manages that completely. So I use that as like a content curation page. Basically, I share some of my own content. I share other people's content. It's all about driving traffic. Pinterest, to that end, is also very traffic focused for me. I create specific graphics for each blog post that go up on Pinterest, and I really think about that platform as a way for me to build the audience on the blog. We're starting to kind of play around with sharing video to Pinterest and also creating some specific graphics that will drive to YouTube. But I don't think of Pinterest as like a community-based platform. I mean, maybe I'm in the wrong there, but really for me, it's a traffic driver. Instagram we talked about, and then YouTube is, I personally feel like it's a completely its own platform. I create content that only lives on YouTube. I create content specifically for YouTube. It's always long form video, and YouTube has its own community. It has its own demographic. It really feels like to me something that you have to treat a little bit differently. The audience skews definitely on the younger side. They're a lot of international. It's not quite as engaged as a platform like Instagram because you can't have that direct line like you can with DMs and things like that. But it's been a really great platform for me. I don't think that it drives a lot of traffic, so I don't think of it as something to push back to the blog. But since YouTube is owned by Google, it's a search engine driver. So your videos, if you're strategic about the content that you're sharing and the recipes you're putting or the keywords you're using in your description, Google searches all of that. So it pulls things up in search results, and that can in turn drive traffic to your blog, or it can drive traffic back to your YouTube page. And yeah, those are basically my main platforms.
So your videos that you make for YouTube don't live on your blog at all?
They do live on the blog. Basically, the reason why I started my YouTube channel was because I was seeing platforms like Facebook and YouTube take off with these, like the handsy videos, the short form overhead videos. And I decided I wanted to try to start making them. And what I realized they were doing was, and if you guys are making any of these, this is a good thing to think about, is that they're basically just speeding up a longer form video. So I was like, okay, well, what if I just didn't speed that video up, put in a little intro and outro of me kind of talking about the recipe, and then bulked them all together, and then put it on YouTube. And that's how I started it. So the specific video itself, I might embed it in a blog post, but I have moved away from just those recipes. I do vlogging, and I do the more like YouTube style videos, but that is how I started. basically I cut down my recipe videos that go onto YouTube. I cut them down and then share them across social. If that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that makes more sense from like a workflow perspective.
Okay.
I was like getting a little stressed out.
Okay.
But I'm glad that I got a laugh because I do want to talk about workflow. Because I think, as many of you probably know, the way that, algorithms work these days, you could pretty much be spending every waking minute on your phone. That's what these platforms want from you. But the big question I have is whether or not that is actually what it takes to grow an audience. So I'm curious, back to Instagram, since it's where most of us spend the majority of our time, would you say, how do you find the balance, I guess, between what you're sharing online and your life IRL, both emotionally, but then also in terms of actual growth? Do you think you reach a point of diminishing returns at any point? Is more time, more posts always better? I'll let you take that, Dara.
Thank you. I am not prepared. No, I'm kidding. I'm like, that's a lot of questions and loaded ones, I think. Yeah, it's kind of tricky because I think back in the day before Instagram changed its algorithm and henceforth screwing most people, I think we can all agree the algorithm is terrible. And before that happened, yes, I think the more time you spent on it, it did lend itself to creating like a bigger following and a faster following at that. Whereas now I feel like even if I am on it a lot, it doesn't necessarily move the needle as much. So it's interesting, like right now with me especially, and again, this is just me like specifically, but I feel like for me, if I do a little bit every day, it's like enough. My growth has definitely slowed, but again, I think that lends itself more to the algorithm as opposed to a content-based thing. But it still grows. It's just a slower growth, So I'm definitely always engaging. I have always been about engaging with my community on there, and I've always been about sharing my life. Like I've always been, including pictures of myself. Even if you go back way into my Instagram in like 2014 or whenever it was that I started, like Skinny Pig NYC, there's still things about me and like my friends, my family. It's always been pretty personal, and I feel like that's one of the things that drew people to me because I was a person, like almost like what you were saying. I wanted people to know that I was a person, not a sandwich. So that's kind of how it started. Thank you.
You're a sandwich to me.
That's okay. But yeah, so like that's kind of how I look at like my content, and with like, again, with growing it, engaging it, I'm content with where it is. I obviously wish, like I bet most people do, that it would grow faster, but I just don't think that's going to happen necessarily.
So what does that actually look like? How many times a day, week are you posting, and how often are you on stories?
Sure. I mean, stories I pretty much do every day. There's hardly a day that goes by where I don't put something on there. I'm not saying it's always interesting, but there's usually something. And I do usually post every day, but I'll be honest with you, there are times where I'm just like, you know what, I'm a little bit sick of just like doing it because I feel like I should be doing it. So I'm like, if I don't have anything to say, I'm not posting for no reason. I went this entire weekend without posting once because I was busy having fun and living my life. Like, imagine that for a second. So it's like, I know, right? It's like, it's crazy. You stop and you think like, okay, maybe I'll just enjoy the moment and not post. And literally nothing happened. It wasn't like I lost 100,000 followers or whatever. Like, it's just, it was fine. It was totally fine. So, yeah.
Well, you touched on something. It is a lot harder to grow these days, obviously, than it used to be, because it's a lot more saturated out there in terms of, who's actually participating online, and then also because of the changing, landscape of Instagram. Yeah. But I'm curious.
Food. Sorry, I was just going to say, and in food especially, the oversaturation is insane. Food bloggers, I think, are like the biggest industry out there that's like completely oversaturated right now, especially on Instagram. So.
Okay, well, to be more optimistic, for those who are just getting started.
Aren't you glad you invited me, BlogHer? Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna, toss this one to Lynn over there. Since you, I think, started, the most recently of all of us, what advice would you give to someone who is, starting at square one tomorrow about differentiating yourself in a very saturated Instagram marketplace or whatever platform you choose to talk about, and then, what are some tools that you use to constantly grow?
Yeah, so the one thing that Alice and I always talk about with Lettucedine and what we have that other people don't have is our brand and our voice. we always talk about our captions. They're witty, they're punny, they're stupid, they're just like, they're fun. And it's just like finding that passion of yours, being genuine and doing it for that reason, not so much of, I want to eat at this restaurant for free, I want to make money. Those are things that come with it. They're bonuses, but what you really should be doing is why you're doing it for. And for us, it was just eating and kind of eating around the city. We were willing to pay for things. We just wanted to try different cuisines and be held accountable for actually doing it versus being like, we want to go there and never going. So like finding that passion, being genuine online, just kind of be nice. It's always good to be kind and be nice. Don't be mean. It bites you in the butt. Like it really does. Just be nice at all times. And then it's like, I totally forgot the second question.
Me too. How do you continuously grow?
Yeah, so I think the idea of growing changes a little. When we first started, it was all about growing in terms of followers. We set different milestones. It was like 1,000 followers, 10,000, 20, 100, and so on from there. But now that we've kind of realized that numbers aren't everything and it is a little bit more saturated and it's harder to grow, for us it's about retaining that audience and making sure that we are engaging in the right ways and we are encouraging people to engage with us as well. Something that always makes us feel good is if we have the same person commenting again and again and actually interacting with us. That's how we think it's important to grow. And what you can do is really kind of set that environment for them to engage, make it a welcoming environment, ask questions, whether it's an answer that it's not what you're looking for, it's still like, just say thanks for answering and kind of letting them know it's a community. It's not just an Instagram, it's a community you're growing and everyone's welcome to just kind of hang out.
No, that's great advice. And I think what you touched upon, which is actually a piece of advice I used to give people who just started blogging back in the day, is just kind of right at it, find your voice, because that is honestly something that takes time. Even just like tapping into what's authentic and genuine to you. And then eventually you'll reach a point where you can start to worry about the growth. And yeah.
I think that sometimes can feel intimidating when you're just starting, find your voice, find whatever. It's be you. Like, just talk. The way that I think about it is I write and I talk on stories like I'm talking to my friends. So I make it feel very welcome, it's very casual. But if that's not how you talk, then that's fine. I mean, really it's not necessarily like finding your brand right away. It's just being who you are. And you'll attract people that enjoy you as a person.
Yeah, and I was gonna say kind of along the same things, like it's like finding the why, like why you're doing this. Like I always say, if you're gonna do something like this, have it be purpose-driven as opposed to results-driven. Like, and what I mean by that is like results meaning like money or whatever. Like, don't make that the reason that you're doing it. Make it like, what's your purpose for doing it? Like, I felt like when I started this, I felt like I had something to say about the food industry and like the, blogging and just eating around NYC in general. So that was what drove me to do this. It was never about money. It was never about eventually ending up here, which is awesome, but that was never why I did it. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
So how do you guys today measure your success in a world where the actual numbers of followers is, kind of not plateauing, but becoming less of, a good feedback form for you guys? And in terms of engagement, how do you tap into even your analytics, or is it something that's just a little bit more ephemeral for how well you're doing with certain things?
I mean, for me, I still pay attention to the numbers. Like, I'm still kind of watching, like, what's resonating with people. So I look at my analytics and I see what types of posts tend to do well with what people are liking and what they're commenting on, what they're remaking. That's another good indication of like a recipe kind of hits home if somebody all of a sudden like your DMs blow up with photos of it. So I definitely still pay attention to follower numbers. And I think that's things that brands look at. We didn't really talk about that at all today, but that's definitely something that brands care about. I care a lot about my DMs and kind of that side of it, because that to me is how I can measure it personally, and it's more of a human, like one-to-one connection. I'm sure you kind of feel similar, but when people are like sliding into your DMs and like asking you questions, and it gives you kind of a pulse on what people want, what they like, and you are able to kind of adjust strategy or adjust course from there. And yeah.
Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say for me, the way I measure is a little bit of, I mean, there's always numbers. I think everybody's looking at numbers, let's be serious. But with me, I know that I do not have nearly as many followers as a lot of my peers in this industry. And it still doesn't seem to hinder any of the opportunities that I'm getting. So I tend to kind of focus what or measure my success, if you will, on the things that I'm getting, like something like this. And I think clout and trust is a big deal to me. So if I'm having brands and companies come to me, be like, we want you to speak at our next event, or we want you to contribute to this article, or whatever it is, I feel like that is a big success measurement for me, because I feel like if you're a trusted voice in the community, I think that speaks a lot for itself, and it helps me not pay attention to the fact that, you know, I might get 3,000 likes on a photo and then the next day get 400, you know? So, I don't know. That's just me.
I think for us, it's also seeing that same audience across different social platforms. That is always like a good validation that it's not like they just stumbled upon you and they're just following you there, but it's like they genuinely enjoy your brand and it's like following you along, and kind of maybe you're pushing out the same content, but you know, maybe you're not, and they're actually sticking along to see what you're doing on each platform.
Okay, well, we have a few more questions before we get to the Q&A, but I want to touch on that last thing a little bit, because I talked a bit offline with some of you about the idea of giving the people what they want, and how that sometimes can conflict with, you know, either your evolution as a human being or a brand, or just kind of in keeping things interesting for yourself. And, you know, oftentimes with the people want, or maybe some more basic things like, I don't know, avocado toast or quinoa, I don't know. A quinoa avocado toast, I don't know. Or bacon, I guess. So how do you guys kind of navigate creating content that both pleases and, you know, will get the kind of numerical response you want with, you know, what you're actually passionate about today?
Yeah, so for us, without a doubt, the thing that, like, the type of food that does best for us is noodles. Just any kind of
what?
noodles.
Noodles.
Noodles, just ramen, udon, any kind of noodle, pasta. Like, noodles just do really well for us. And I think people are always looking for the next noodle place. You know, it's like, and it's just like, they're always just like, where can we eat this? Where can we get that? And that's great, but like something that Alice and I really want to get into is creating recipes. We want to like explore more on just cooking. And as we're growing up, like, it's great to like eat out all the time, but still we want to be able to cook for ourselves and use the flavors we learn outside, inside, and all that. So it's like, we're kind of going into that cooking thing by doing what people love, noodles, cooking noodles. So it's a mix of like what the audience wants. They want more noodle pics. They want a noodle, like everything noodle. You'll be surprised. Noodles do really well for us. But, you know, it's like also like we're experimenting to cook. We're learning how to use different noodle types and different flavors. And it's all about like giving them what they want, but still letting us grow and sharing our growth online.
Yeah, I'm curious how that pivot happens, and maybe this is actually a good question for Alyssa, because you're not just doing quinoa anymore. You're not simply quinoa. And I know for me, I started off really in the food space and then had to pivot because of my autoimmune disease to talking about just gluten-free food, and then eventually about health. And maybe from the outside, you know, we're all just like, you know, living in it, I think. And I thought that those changes would be just like so jarring for people, you know, like imagine someone talking about healthy food and then talking about health. Whoa. But, you know, it can feel when you're so consistent and focused on what your quote unquote brand is, it can feel a little strange to kind of reach outside of it. So I'm curious how you guys have managed that pivot.
I mean, for me, I totally agree. It was like a fear thing for me. I was just, people are going to leave, but your audience evolves with you. And for those that don't, then you kind of just have to be okay with that and know that as you're moving into a new type of content, you're going to attract new people. So my brand has changed over time. It used to be like, I used to include meat recipes. Now I'm mostly plant-based. I share a lot of vegan content on YouTube, but I'm not completely vegan. So you're always going to make some people uncomfortable or upset. And you have to just kind of be okay with that and know that you're going to be reaching the people at that point in time that need your help. I don't know. That's kind of how I think about it, that my content's going to evolve with me because my brand is me still. And until it gets to the point where maybe it is bigger than me, and which I don't think it will, I'm just going to do what I want to do. And hopefully people follow and just like continue.
Yeah, for me, kind of the same. Like, you're never going to be able to please everybody, and you're going to make people uncomfortable. I mean, I make people uncomfortable, like, every day with my sense of humor. And I feel like with my content, it's been the same sort of thing where it's evolved over time. And the ones that, I mean, this is going to sound harsh maybe, but, like, the ones that fall away to me are like the sheep. They are just like the ones that follow, like, the gluttonous food porn accounts, and they have the million other ones that they could follow. That's not why people follow me. I feel like they follow us because of our, like, personalities and our individual brands and voices. So that's kind of how I look at it, is like, yeah, it's going to evolve and it's going to change, but, like, hopefully the people that really believe what you believe are going to stick with you and move along with you.
Awesome. All right, we're going to do a quick fire round, really quick, with some tactical tips for people. So first, what would you say the biggest mistake people make is on social media? Lynn?
Oh my God. Okay. So the biggest.
You can pass if you want.
No. So, okay, I can do this. So for me personally, so a good way to engage with people is comment on people's photos. That's a good way to just engage, number one thing. But for me, it's about what kind of comment you're making. We get a lot of comments saying, like, check out our page, we're a new food blog. Those are the comments I don't pay attention to. You're not engaging with me, you're just leaving a comment asking me to do something. And it's like, it's not that I don't want to check out your page, it's just more like, But if you're leaving comments, like, actually about something relevant and you're someone always commenting, and I notice these usernames because, there are not that many of them, so it's like you notice the names and I'm more likely to check you out then. Of course, you should always engage with the people you want to engage with, but, like, leave genuine comments, leave comments that are kind of interacting and not so much like, hey, check out my page, because that just doesn't work for me.
I think for me, I think one of the biggest mistakes is not being consistent. I think that has really helped me grow as a brand in staying consistent across all of my platforms with the content that I'm sharing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be sharing multiple times every single day, but having a schedule and being there on a consistent basis in front of people, I think just will help you, reach more people, and you'll just stay more top of mind, which will keep them engaged.
I don't really have anything to add, honestly. That's literally what I was going to say. Go for it.
Go for it, Alyssa.
My other one is not copying other people's styles just because you feel like it's what does well. Like, if you all of a sudden are seeing the dark and moody photos doing really well on Instagram, for me personally, like, that's not my brand and that's not my style. So even if that all of a sudden took over the internet, I mean, that's just not what I do. So I'm not going to, like, try to all of a sudden copy a different kind of photo just because it's what's doing well.
And everyone's audiences are different.
Totally.
Noodles don't do as well for me. They still, gluten-free spaghetti still does well. But okay, next, what is your favorite tool for managing your social media accounts? It could be an app. It could be, I don't know, a team building trick or tip, whatever you make of it.
I use an app called Tailwind. I use Tailwind for Pinterest and for Instagram. I have a small team that helps me, and the girl that helps me with Instagram and Pinterest, we use that together. And should I, like, talk about how I use it? Yeah. Okay. So we use it for Pinterest to just, like, push out pins. But for Instagram, she helps me build out an editorial calendar. So the platform itself will kind of tell you the times of days that are the most engaging for your specific audience. And so she helps me put photos in those spots. And then I get a notification on my app that it's time to post, and I write a caption, I pull in the hashtags and everything like that. So it's not like she's doing the work for me in the sense that she's writing for me, but she's kind of behind the scenes helping me put my feed together. And if it's something that I don't agree with or I don't want to, it reminds me to post at the very least. So that's something that has been a game changer for me.
And how does she do the editorial calendar? For those at home who maybe don't have a team or someone, a taskmaster for that, how can you kind of recreate that on your own?
So I think really it's like we share any types of new content. As soon as I have a post that is scheduled, she'll pull a photo out of that post and drop it into the editorial calendar. And then we are trying right now to post 3 times every single day, and we have it as breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's kind of how I think about it. So the time of day, I structure the content, and then I will weave video in and out of that. So the platform isn't entirely video, but video is, for me, the most engaged piece of content. So sprinkling in a video at least once a day, I try to, maybe every other, is a good way for me to keep my numbers up and keep people engaged.
Do either of you have any tools, apps to add?
I mean, not tools or apps necessarily, other than I actually do use Tailwind also for like Pinterest especially. It's like great for that. But one thing I'll just say is like a piece of advice maybe to kind of manage things is I usually will schedule time out of my day to engage on Instagram. I know that sounds maybe a little ridiculous, but I think when you start kind of doing it like you're just checking it all day and like at random times and you like leave a comment here, leave a comment there, I feel like you end up doing it and you're not really enjoying it. So like I'll actually set aside time in my day, like maybe a half hour, to kind of just be really in it and like look at what I'm doing and look at what other people are doing and actually pay attention to the content as opposed to just throwing out a random comment like, oh my God, yum. Like it's like, no. So I think that helps. I think that helps a little bit, at least for me, because it forces me to pay attention in like a genuine, honest way.
Yeah, maybe there's an app for preventing you from doing Instagram for the rest of the day. I need that
Exactly.
app. Lynn, do you have anything to add before we turn it over to Q&A?
Nothing to add, but I will check out these tools you guys just mentioned.
Tailwind is great. Tailwind is great, just so everybody knows. Yeah.
I use it as well. All right, who's got a question for these ladies? Yes, you right up front. Is there a mic to hand to them? Or oh, okay. Wonderful. Even better.
Right? Take over the world all at once. Hi, my name is Blessing. I'm a baker. My handle is at Sugar Bomb Sweet. Shameless plug-in. And
Respect.
Thank you. And my thing that I'm trying to move, more into blogging because I do a lot of lives, and even though I don't have a large audience yet, people do interact with me heavily. Now, the thing about it is I've been reading a lot about how to grow your following on social media and when you want to get into blogging, your recipes and stuff like that. But like, so people say for growing your social media, it's important to like, sometimes they like share other people's stuff. And then my question really is like, as a baker who's trying to get my own product out there and engage with my own audience, like create my own content, is that just like a thing that people do for numbers, or is that like actual proper advice?
Okay, so the question is, how often should you be sharing other people's content and kind of, putting, well, I can't think of the word I'm thinking of, but yeah. Paying it forward? Mm-hmm. And how much should you be focusing on your own? Do you guys want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's always good because I think that counts as engagement, is like interacting with other people and like giving props to somebody that deserves it. But don't do it just because some article told you that you should. I think if there's somebody who genuinely made something that you genuinely feel is like awesome, then definitely share it, tag them, and like maybe it'll create some more engagement, because I do notice that when I do that more, like I feel like I get more followers out of it and I just get more engagement. So I think it can be good, but I wouldn't ever have it dominate over sharing your own content. Like have it be like 80-20 or something like that. That's what I would say.
I also think it's platform specific. So I would not share other people's content on my Instagram or my YouTube channel. Those are just for my own content. Pinterest, sure, I'll pin other people's stuff, and Facebook I also share. But one thing that you could do for Instagram specifically is leverage your stories.
That's what I
meant. If you wanted to share other people's content. So there's like the little arrow in the corner of every post is you can add it to your story. So if it was maybe like you wanted to do a weekly roundup of things that you're loving, like, and you can just share other people's content that way, they'll still get notified that they're getting tagged, and could be a good way to build engagement. But I personally would not share other people's content on my feed.
Yeah, let me just clarify. That's what I meant to on stories. I don't I don't post anything on my actual feed that isn't mine, but on stories I'll definitely share other people's content. Sorry, that's what I meant. I think some people do that still for to get a following, because when you become sometimes just a repost account, you can grow a lot faster. So I'm assuming that that's why they do that. I never have, and I know you never have. A lot of people haven't, but I stay away from that. So yeah, that's really a judgment call on your part, but I would say stories, test that out first.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Yes.
My name is Jalissa. I also do the baking thing. I was wondering that if you post too much, do you think that that could decrease your following or draw people to like not want to continue?
Okay, so the question is about frequency, how often you should post, and I'm going to assume it's platform specific, but I'll let others get into it a little bit more.
You want me to go? Okay. So for me, I realized I said that I share 2 to 3 times a day on Instagram, which is a lot. But what I realized as I was looking through my feed is that they're not, like, I'll see posts from 3 days ago. So I know that my people aren't seeing every single post that I'm posting. So I'm fine sharing a lot on Instagram. Pinterest, I mean, that's going out like 50 times a day probably, and then Facebook is probably 8 or 10. And then YouTube is only twice a week for me, and that's it. So I don't increase on that. I have a very specific schedule. So I think it maybe depends on like your brand, and you just got to test it out. Like, you're not going to know unless you try. So if you start posting a bunch and then you notice that your followers are like decreasing a lot, then maybe you are posting too much, but it could also help you grow. So I think it's kind of a test.
I think it's also based on the type of content you're pushing out. Like, pushing out content you're genuinely proud of, and it's not just like pushing out something to push out something, but pushing out something because you really want to share it and it's something you're really proud of. I think that helps. But like, I wouldn't push out content just to push out content.
All right, we're going to take one more. Okay, yeah, right up front.
Thank you. Hey, so my question is, I am a digital marketing manager for a food distributor, so I'm in the B2B world, as opposed to, I think, a lot of people here that are D2C. So I know all 3 of you have very different brand voices, and my question is, when you're writing to different restaurants with different styles of cuisine, how do you flex that voice, and how do you reach your audience, but also support where the food is coming from and support, you know, the chefs that are creating that, and how does it kind of flex between?
Dara or Lynn, you're the restaurant peeps.
She was saying like different chefs have different styles. Obviously, like somebody might be a very heavy like meat focused type of chef, or maybe somebody's vegan. So like, for example, me, I'm a big meat eater. Like, sorry guys, I know. Sorry. But like, yeah, I'm a big meat eater. So I mean, the thing is though, I do appreciate vegan chefs. In fact, I think it's a difficult thing to do, and like, you know, sometimes make things taste good that maybe aren't like supposed to be vegan, and they make it amazing. So I actually have a huge respect for that, but it's definitely not something that my audience is used to seeing. So at least with me, when I'm going somewhere that's like that, I'll always be like, PSA, guys, I'm at a vegan restaurant, don't pass out or anything. Like, you know, it's always like, oh my God, you ate vegan. And I'm like, yeah, like I like to try different things. And I think for me, I just have to stay consistent to my own brand voice, and I wouldn't change it for somebody else. I would just make sure that I'm taking what they're telling me and putting it in my voice, if that makes sense. Like, I wouldn't, you know, shun something for being different, and also if it wasn't good, I wouldn't write about it or post about it. So I think that, you know, helps as well.
I don't really have too much to add on that, but I would say we don't really change our voice based on the restaurant, but what we would do is we'll like start a conversation. It would be like, oh, tell us your thoughts on this, and then we can kind of engage with them offline through like DM or something, where it's like just educating them, especially people who are unfamiliar, especially when you're like taking like the Impossible Burger, that's a good one. Everyone's just like, what is this? It's so weird. And it's like, we're not going to change the way we're pushing out our message, but we're happy to have that conversation and educate you on what we just learned as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for sticking around for the panel. Stay true to your voice. Don't focus too much on the numbers. Consistency, consistency, consistency.
And authenticity.
And authenticity. All right, awesome. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, guys.